Welcome to the Hobby Chop Podcast. This is the third episode. We're feeling good. You got me, Big Ken, Zip, and Tyler. Um, the feedback has been excellent, so we're excited to keep it going and try new things every week to just kind of get things finely tuned the way we like it here. So today's episode, we're going to start out like a little preview. We're going to start out of what our strategies. Tyler and I just came back from Culture Collision. What our strategies were, what we were expecting, what we weren't expecting, what happened, what didn't happen, and just give you, kind of a breakdown too of was it worth it? Is it worth traveling to these bigger shows and what we saw there, and kind of report back on that. And then shout out to the listeners. We had just a ton of listener questions that came in. So the second half of this, we're just going to be answering. There were just such great questions. We just felt like we had some other stuff lined up. We just felt like, you know what, we're going to answer these questions instead, because we just had a lot of great questions that came in. So hello, Tyler, Zip, how you guys doing?
Good. I'm glad you guys are back. I even though we're remote and stuff, I had so much FOMO while you guys were down in Atlanta, and I was at home. Wife had the flu. Me and the baby missed it, thank God. But I was definitely just sitting at home, like just jealous. So I can't wait to hear you guys talk a little bit about the strategy going into that show.
Yeah, it was really good, enjoyable trip. I think the location is awesome. As far as it's one of the better shows that I've ever been at, where the hotel and the convention center and everything you need is right there. So that's a big win, right? It wasn't we flew in with a lot of luggage, and it was never at any point stressful to navigate it. So certainly helpful from a location and a setup perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from Ken's solo podcast, sounds like he did good. It sounds like you both flew home with not much luggage too, so that's always nice.
Certainly a lighter case on the way home than going down.
The plane had an easier takeoff coming home than it did on the way down. That's for sure.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and I did this show last year, and when you do a show. And I always say, know the show, right? And you're on your way back to the show, and it's much like anything else. Say if you go on vacation or you go take a trip somewhere, and it's your first time there, and then when you leave, you have a whole list of, I wish I did this, I wish I did that, and if I was going to do it differently, this is what I would do, right? So I had that in my mind coming back. So going down a year later with all these things in mind, I showed up to a show in a great venue, but it was a completely different show. It was and we could probably say it's a completely different hobby a year later than it was a year ago. So even though you're expecting, like me, I'm expecting, and I'm telling Tyler, I'm telling you all these, this is what to expect. This is what worked for me last year. This didn't work for me last year. Going back, things were, I think, completely different. Again, it was like a whole new experience.
So Tyler, tell me a little bit, like, after Ken told you about his previous experience at the show, what were your expectations with what he said, and then how to like the reality, expectations versus reality?
So I think, especially when you're going to a big show like that, it's important to have a strategy of what you're going to do with inventory, what you're going to go about putting out to try to make it the most profitable, but the best trip possible, and just a general, strategy for the market in the moment, because as we all know, it can be so volatile. With it being a culture collision show, right? And there's sneakers in the room, and non-sports and stuff like that. I kind of expected some of that to be a little more popular, so I dabbled over into the WWE card market a little bit and had a few of those things, and I also certainly had plenty of local flavor between the Braves and the Falcons. In my case, with football and baseball should be in decent times to sell right now. However, I would say the local flavor did okay, but it wasn't as strong as I thought it might be. And then the WWE stuff I thought would do really great, and I didn't have anybody ask about. Like, I have a really nice high grade Hulk Hogan rookie card in my case, and nobody looked at it all weekend. So, you had that from a strategy perspective was a little different. So you had to kind of move on the fly. The other thing that I talked a little bit about last week, right, was a strategy of what to do with the guys in the playoffs. And you all know, but the listeners don't. After our podcast last week, I went on a Jaden Daniels downtown buying spree. So I showed up into Atlanta with 2 Daniels downtowns, a Penix downtown, those kind of things, and was able to move them very quickly at the right time, right before you saw a little market correction. So rode the hype. And then I think it's important too at that kind of show is to kind of get a feel for the room, especially any big show, 2-day show, 3-day show. Take a lap around, especially when you have like those VIP hours. Get there in there early, set your stuff up, and go take a lap. Get a pulse on what's in the room, and then be willing to adjust, especially if people don't react the way you might expect to your case. And that was huge for me this weekend. Was the pickups that I went out and made during the show or at trade night, etc., were all about creating low pop rarity in my case to make it a little bit more eclectic, where it interested both the repacker and the collector. And I think that was very successful. I think Ken got to see it. I had several times where I had a really hard card to find, and I got the sticker. It didn't matter what the comp was. I didn't have to play that game plenty this weekend. Yeah. Put a sticker in there. Good luck finding it elsewhere in the room, and you get your number. So I think it's important to, understand that and really think that through with your strategy, unless you're just somebody who can roll through modern inventory very quickly. And that, as quick as I move it, I don't think I move it that to be able to do that. So I have to find some opportunity to build that rarity in the case, which helps. To me, the biggest compliment in the case is I had several people walk up and say, "You have really nice or cool stuff." And if I'm hearing that over and over, I'm winning.
You've done your job.
Yeah.
One of the things I saw firsthand with you, Tyler, which I was really taking notes on, is you knew exactly what cards to buy. Like, you went out and found certain cards to buy, because as soon as you bought these cards and you put them in your case, immediately people were like, kept asking about that same card. And then you picked up, the Mahomes card, right? The field level. And we go to trade night. Every person at that trade night came over and asked about that card. And then you went, and I think it was Kobe. You picked up a couple.
Yeah, a 2002 Kobe refractor and a PSA 10. I also picked up the East-West Jordan Kobe in a BGS 9.5 True Gem Plus, which is a really hard grade, awesome card, rare card. And, it's just, there's not going to be much competition with that card in the room.
Yep.
I saw it. And the thing is, when you go out and buy those cards at that kind of show, do yourself a favor, always kind of have an idea of what those older rare cards mean and what generates value down the road for those. Because I'll be very honest, I went out and I paid full comp on the Mahomes. I paid full comp on the East-West. I paid full comp on a LeBron second-year black refractor. I made money on all those cards, still paying full comp, because I understood the rarity and the pop count.
Yep.
And you kind of get what you put into it from a research perspective.
Yeah. And one other thing that was interesting was there were 3 of us in a row. We all had a Brady 2000 Brady Bowman PSA 8, and all 3 of us had a Michael Penix downtown in ungraded, a raw downtown, right? 3 of us in a row in this whole show. We had the same exact cards. So one guy came and he bought the downtown, right, from the guy to my right, and he bought it from you too, right? Or the guy to my left, and he bought it from you. And then he came to me and said, hey, I just bought this card for this amount of money, and I wouldn't budge on the price, right? So, and afterwards, I realized that he bought the same card from the guy on my left, and the guy on my right, and didn't buy it from me. But luckily enough, on Saturday, I was able to make that deal and actually kind of do a little better, right? Holding out on the guys coming early who are probably buying to resell that or to do something else with it, versus a Falcons fan, a guy who showed up all dressed in Falcon stuff, was the guy who ended up buying that card from me. So interesting that there was a decent mix of people who were local, but there were a lot of people who traveled in for this and could care less about like the Falcons cards. That I went out to find these cards to put them in my case, thinking, I'm going to Atlanta, everybody's going to want a Falcons card, right? And they didn't sell as fast as I thought they would. So that strategy was kind of a bad strategy going into it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's, sometimes, from a negotiating perspective, when you do have something that you can be strong on that not everybody else has, that's the time to be strong and not, get caught up in taking a number just to get something moved. Ken, you did it with the Penix downtown. As I said, I had 2 Jaden Daniels downtowns. One that I paid really strong on, the PSA 9, I made a little bit of money on. I had a raw copy that I was into very well. And at the first trade night, I had stickered it for $2,200 in my case. Never had comp more than $1,900. Everybody walked up, wanted to buy it, offered me $2,000. I said, no, it's going to PSA unless I get $2,200. And eventually the right guy walked up and it went for $2,200. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of, knowing when you can get that. I did it with a Jordan PSA 9 Planet Metal. I paid really strong on it, $1,600 because it had a $1,700 comp. Throw it in the case for $2,000. I wanted to bring the card home. I told Ken I was very sad when I sold it, and a guy walked up and he collected Jordan, and that card's hard to find. He said, "That's no problem. I'll give you that number all day." So
yeah, that's a really great grade for that card. What's the pop like on that? That's
like 55 and a 9.
Yeah, I was gonna say that can't be. Yeah, and those a lot of those are like tucked away, right? Yeah, like those don't see the light of day. So
yeah, same thing. Like those refractors and those inserts and things like that. I think every one of those cards that I picked up that moved quickly, those LeBrons, Kobe's, and Jordans, all pop counts under 70. And either not 8s, 9s, 10s, super low pops, stuff you just don't see. And it's important. Like, I moved a Steph Curry rookie card, and I got back a really nice NT game used Kobe Bryant patch out of 25. And I was willing to take that card at a nice trade value. And I didn't really want to trade that Curry, but again, I can find that Curry again. I can't find that Kobe patch. Again, there's never been one comped in 4 years.
You telling me about that Planet Metal Jordan, it's going to sound funny coming from all people of me, but like when you get a special card like that and you're at like a destination show, is there a better time to pay super strong on it? You know what I mean? Like that's going home with you, right? Like you were probably actually sad to sell that, like you had said. So like if you're that guy and the comp is what you said 17 and you got $2,000 for it, like who cares? That's his Planet Metal, and unless he's able to upgrade it to a 10, which is but like or a 9.5 or whatever he wants to do, or keep it forever, So that's kind of cool, and it kind of gives at least me, I was at home, right? So like that guy had that moment at that show, and he'll remember that card. Because I know, Ken, you always talk about like stories with your cards and stuff. So like that's kind of interesting, and I don't know. I just liked hearing that. That's pretty interesting to me that like you were able to get that, but it makes sense, right? Like it's not like it's a silver prism, whatever. Like it's Jordan high grade insert. Like so cool.
Yeah, and I think. Go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
I was just going to say, even though I was selling a lot of modern stuff, And just get your opinion on this, Tyler. I really think this stuff you're talking about here, the Jordans, the Kobe's, the thing, I think those were the things that were the most popular in the show. This is what people were really coming to a show like that to look at, where a lot, for the most part, you go to a lot of these shows and it's all the modern stuff. Everybody wants the Daniels, the Penix, the this, the that. But it just felt like this show had a feel like people were really looking for a lot of those more the older, more specific, low pop, low numbered, rare, scarce cards.
Yeah, Grail cards were definitely in vogue for the show, right? Like, the case hits and the modern football. Ken did very well because he was first to market with a ton of freshly graded Jaden Daniels, and that's important on those cards, right? Being the first one there, and with his WNBA stuff. But there was a lot of people that literally the Jordans, the Kobe's, the LeBrons, the Mahomes, the Brady's, numbered autos, vintage cards, right? Well-centered vintage cards did really well. I didn't talk about. I picked up a 68 Topps Nolan Ryan rookie in a PSA 3.5, but probably had 6 or 7 centering. Paid full comp on the card. Basically, it's $700. Threw it in the case for $900. Somebody snapped it, no problem, because the centering was beautiful. And don't be afraid to venture into that space when you get there. Just understand what sells the card, and it's such a shift, right? When you move from the modern world into that world, or even really the '90s inserts, right? Then it becomes rarity in those '90s inserts refractor world, and then when you get into the vintage, it just becomes about centering. The grade means less. It means a little something. It puts you in the ballpark, but then understanding when it's better to buy the PSA 3 with great centering versus the PSA 4 with okay centering, or the PSA 5 with okay centering. You get more out of the 3, and because that's those guys that are buying those cards, they're putting them on a shelf and they want to look at them and they want them to be pretty. That they want to show those off, and that's important to. It's just this show, I think, was a very good example of not just having inventory, but doing some research and just having a good understanding of inventory in general, the right type of inventory to do. And I think we see so many people, especially at the small local shows, who just show up with cards hoping to move them. Whereas, you put a little more time working into what the right cards to get your hands on are. And quantity is not always better. Yeah. Just show up with the right ones, and you'll have great results.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, like, obviously, Ken, you did your whole show and really went into Culture Collision. That was a great listen too. If you guys were to go back to that show, what's something that you would change that you didn't do this time, if there is anything?
I'll jump in first. I think for me, having all the modern first to grade football, that worked out perfectly. I had a whole case of, Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clarks and other WNBA stuff. Knowing what I know now, I may have left that older WNBA stuff out and maybe found some 90s inserts or something along those lines to put in that case to give, to keep it diverse, right? So I have one case with football, I have some pop culture, and I have a lot of the women's basketball, right? But I felt that the women's basketball was going to do very well at this show because it does very well at every show. It's like I can never leave a show with a Caitlin Clark card, right? Everybody's coming in to buy them. And this show, I left without one, but it was because one guy came and bought them all from me. It wasn't like I would, and I was probably very lucky too, right? That one guy came and bought them all because people there really weren't looking for the WNBA stuff or the women's basketball stuff. So yeah, I probably would have put some different cards in that other case to be more diverse. And I think everything else I did, I had very low end football and the one touches. I had low end graded. I had mid end graded. I had some high end graded. I think I just had a great variety that people were interested in it, and it kept me busy for 2 solid days and at trade night?
I would have probably done 2 things slightly different. One is I showed up with what I would say a small amount of cheap football autos. When I'm talking cheap, I'm talking like $20 to $80 range of cheaper slabs, cheaper rookie cards, autos, RPAs, those kind of things. The repackers that you love to see to get rid of that kind of stuff showed up and took that very quickly from me. I would have smashed together a full 2 or 3 row box of that stuff and brought that, because I would have moved it all without question at 85 to 90%.
That's when you have someone coming up going, how much for the box? How much for the box?
and I could have bought all of that. I could have bought all of that stuff in collections for 60% and made a killing on it. So I would have showed up with a little bit more of that. And so I'm certainly got that in the back of my mind, because there seems to be a lot of movement in the repack space where people are building these repacks with big ceilings and then a lot of floors. And so those guys need those cheaper items. And then the other thing that I would have done is I talked about last week with the Mahomes market in general, kind of breaking it into thirds. And I still feel pretty comfortable about that, and I moved my PSA 9 red yellow, my PSA 9 optic base at the show. The one thing I think I would have probably pulled out of the box sitting over here on the shelf is 1 or 2 of the Prism Silver or the Optic Hollows, and had a couple of the little bit bigger ones because the comp police weren't out on Mahomes. I got $1,100 out of the red yellow. The last comp was $925. So, I mean, guys were there ready to buy Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. So I would have probably shifted my one-third to having 50% of that out this week, try to move 25% this week and hold 25% for winning the Super Bowl. Yeah. That would have been something I would have done a little differently. And I would have just used that to try to go get bigger Mahomes, to be honest with you. Mm. And I would have just completely repurposed that into more rarity in the Mahomes market.
I hear you say that, and one last thing I'd like to ask about that, because Ken and I had a conversation separate, and Ken, big Chiefs fan, he said to me, kind of like you said, you would have moved it into a bigger Mahomes, right? Like, which I totally get, like a consolidation and like a level up, right? But what Ken said to me, and it's so true, is like, is now the time to be buying Patrick Mahomes?
I think it's still not a terrible time. Like, if the right card presented itself this week, I would certainly buy it. And listen, I'm an eBay bidder right now I bought a select field level silver. We talked about it last week. There's 4 of them on eBay that I've got bids in on right now. For moving from PSA 10 BGS 95s to PSA 10s. I think the value is to getting into a more rare Mahomes. And that's kind of what I mean by bigger, right? Because I think that has the potential to be bigger. I'm not for sure if I would consolidate it into a $20,000 Patrick Mahomes card, right? We saw somebody walking around with the red auto optic out of 50, and he wanted $20K for it. And it's honestly a $20K card, but I don't want a $20K card. That's not really what I'm trying to have. Maybe if it's something I'm putting back and never letting anybody see or whatever, sure. But I'm not trying to have that from an inventory perspective because it's just so hard to move. Ken and I had a great conversation about this on the way home on the plane. Kind of going back to that strategy piece a little bit, is my sweet spot is really, I said going down was $200 to $1,000. It really kind of morphed into $200 to $1,500 was a great sweet spot. And going forward for the rest of the year, that's the range I'm trying to stick in. Let me have cards in that range. I know where I can move those cards to, and I can move them for cash. There's not a lot of trade going on there if I don't want to trade, but I can take some trade on them too. So
and you know what? That's a good point, because I feel like that's a really good price for like the average consumer. Like, you know, almost everyone could get a card in that space.
Yeah. And you're safe too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even if the torn ACL or anything like that, I mean, you're not getting buried on a card. You're not losing any sleep over it if a $300 or $400 card goes down to $100 or $200. But if you're in a $20,000
Yeah.
card, right,
Right.
and it goes down to $1,000, you're losing a little sleep over it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing too, I think you can do in that $2,000 to $1,000 range type thing is, especially if you focus on, as we talked about earlier, the rarity and pop counts and stuff like that, and really making sure you have plenty of that in your inventory versus what everybody else has, is you can set on that inventory for 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks in a row and not have to feel like you have to move your entire case every time you go out. Right? You can move a few cards, make a little money, and not have to fight that battle, because that stuff isn't going to comp every single day. So you're not losing money on a Tuesday night when it's sitting here in your case. Whereas if I've got a Justin Herbert Hollow Optic PSA 10, I may make $40 one day. I could lose 60 the next day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's like playing crypto game.
No, I hear you. Yeah, dude. When I'm buying the collections and those cards are like that, like they comp so often that it's just like, all right, so at this moment, and then like the next day when I go to sell to like someone specifically, it's like, oh, look at that new comp from last night. You know, like
Yep.
And it's just, yeah. So I hear you on that. You guys have any final thoughts wrapping up Culture Collision? Anything like that?
I don't know. It's interesting you say that. You just reminded me of, on Thursday night before I went to the show, I was pricing cards out and I didn't finish. So Friday when I got to the show, I finished pricing some of those cards. And I could remember Saturday morning when the doors opened, the guy came up and says, "You have any room on that card?" And I said to him, "Well, I know the last one sold at 75." And he said, "No, it was 32." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, it sold an hour ago for $32." So that's how fast, like that price had changed on just that one card. And those things happen all the time. Like you price a card, especially on a weekend, like on a Friday, and you price a card, and then Friday night all these listings end, and you go to the show on Saturday, you could either be selling it for less than you should have, or you've got it listed too high and people aren't interested.
Yeah. And I would close kind of piggybacking on that comment is, I know there's plenty of people who don't like the repack buyers. I personally, in the opposite way, I think they allow us to keep inventory flowing and get rid of some of the stuff we need to that's stale. So again, I think that's where it's important to understand how those guys think in their buying process. Not to harp on it too much, but going back to when something comps a lot, they like it, but you're going to go buy the most recent comp with that. The other stuff that they like too, that doesn't comp as often, understand that they don't need the 2-day-old comp for that, as long as there are some comps that they can create a real value on. Because if they throw a Jordan into a repack or Mahomes into a repack, nobody's getting upset if they get that card.
Yeah, because it's going to be well above the floor. And
right.
Bringing it up, probably something at another time we'll dive into a little bit.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be good talk. Transitioning into the listener questions, I think we'll start with Howard Sealer, because we just talked all about the shows and his question is show related. So here we go. Do you think there are too many local shows competing for the same vendors and buyers each weekend? Do you think it's better to mix it up, selling at larger shows like Nashville, Culture Collision, the National, the Dallas Card Show, Fenway, or Mohegan Sun? Bigger shows have such higher rates for tables and travel expenses, but much larger buyer pools. Smaller shows have much lower table rates, smaller tables, but minimal travel expenses, but much smaller buyer pools. I feel the answer is somewhere in between, but it's a balancing act on expenses and profits. So Howard, thanks for the question and the answer to your question in the same comment. But Ken, you're the de facto, most experienced show dealer here. So why don't you kick that one off?
So you guys go to all these local shows here in Connecticut. We know who some of the bigger players are, the guys that hit all the big shows that are in Dallas, that are in Chicago, they're in Indy, they're out on the West Coast, right? But they set up at these shows too, right? And if you notice what it used to be is everybody would go to the local show and buy what they could and then take that inventory to the big shows to sell them off. And I don't think, and to what Howard's saying, there's so many shows now. I agree with his answer, right?
Yeah.
I agree that there's way too many shows, but I would not want, personally, I wouldn't want to see him go away, because what would I do on the weekend, right? I go to shows on the weekends all the time. But I 100% agree that traveling to a show with good inventory, right, and probably cash heavy too, you could do very well. We proved it this weekend. We went down to Atlanta. We had expenses. We had, airline. We had a rental car. We had a hotel room. We had meals. We had the show costs, the table costs, but we did very well. We did not go home saying, geez, that table was way too expensive, or, man, I can't believe we spent that much on the. No, we didn't. We went home saying, wow, what a great couple days we had. And I think that happens to more people going. I hear people talk all the time about, I've never been to Dallas, but how Dallas is just an amazing show, and people are just, buying. And right before we came on, right, Tyler, we were just having this conversation about, we were just two guys from Connecticut at that show, and we did very well. But there were a lot of people in that show selling a lot of things. So there was a lot of people at this particular show that did very well and went home happy. And this show is probably a quarter of the size of what Dallas or Burbank is, right? So, I think, yes, there's a lot of local shows, but they're busy. Those local shows are busy. They're drawing people in. People are showing up. There's foot traffic. I set up at some of those shows. I'm selling stuff on the weekends. I'm buying stuff on the weekends. It's certainly not at a level of a bigger show, right? It's at a smaller level, but it's a hobby, and this is what we're doing. And I think, the bigger shows are definitely worth, going to, if you're in a position like I am, where I can go and set up as a dealer and buy and sell and trade and things like that.
How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that, especially in this area, and knowing kind of what it looks like in other parts of the area, that we do have a lot of local shows, and I do worry that there is some saturation. But to Ken's point, it's also, for my thought process and really my strategy for 2025, is go buy at those shows so I can do more bigger regional and national shows. So I don't want to see them go away. I want as many opportunities to see as many cards as I can to get the right deal. The one thing that I would say is I would not be afraid, if I was the random person, to venture into a bigger show that has a higher cost of table and comes with expenses, right? Because your opportunity to have a big day just is so exponential, right? If I go set up at a local show, within, let's say, an hour of my house, and I have a great day, that's probably a $2,000 in sales day, right? That's a great day at a 9 to 2 local show. That table cost me $40. So that table cost me 2% of my total sales. So it's a numbers game for me. When I look at a great day in Atlanta, that's probably going to be about $12K in sales. And my table is about 2.5% of my total sales. I factor in the rest of my expenses on a daily perspective. I just did the math on Atlanta. I basically spent about 4% of my total sales on expenses for the weekend. So if I have an opportunity to have a 12K day and only give up 4% back to expenses, or a 2K day and give up 2%, I'm going to the bigger show, right? And now you're only going to do that if you have the right kind of inventory. But if you're the kind of person who shows up at a local show with inventory that can do 2K at a local show here in Connecticut, you can show up with the right kind of inventory to do 10 or 12,000 at a huge show like Atlanta or Nashville or Dallas or places like that. And actually, then it just becomes relative, and you'll make more money. Because you just really have to just break it down that way. That's what works for me. Because trust me, I was there at one point where I was like, do I really want to put all of that expense in up front? But it's worth it on the backside.
Yeah, and I think the thing I agree most with what you said I'll just harp on it like I've harped on in the past, is that I think it really comes down to each individual's own situation and circumstances.
Yep, for sure.
Because I know there are dealers who like, they're constantly setting up at the local shows and they do great with what they're doing, and vice versa. You guys kind of dabble into both. And me, I don't do it anymore because I frankly I don't have time. Like I have a baby. Like I really like don't have time to set up at the show. Like if I'm gonna go to a show, I'm gonna go walk, and it's basically as a social thing to chat with people. You know what I mean? Like, so I really think to Howard's question, I guess wrapping this up, it really comes down to what's gonna work for you as a seller and like your inventory. So like to Tyler's point, going down to Atlanta and you said, a good day was 12K, you were there 2 days. So
Yep.
Do the math. If you can bring that much inventory, maybe it's worth doing.
Yep.
Right. And like, I think there's a lot more people who are not going to have that amount of inventory than that do. Right. And I think that's important just to say too, is like, if, I wouldn't want someone to overextend themselves going to a show. And then like, imagine Tyler, you went down to Atlanta and did all that, but you only had like the inventory for like a local show. You'd be done for.
Yeah. That's why I said it's very important you can't go to any show, local or big show, without a strategy. And it's understanding what you can do at a local show and can you scale it at a big show. Yep. If you're somebody who can only do 500 on a local show on a great day, you probably can't do enough. Even if you 6X, right, you cannot do enough at a big show to really make it worth it. But if you're the guy who can do 1,500 to 2K at a local show, you can 6X it and do it at a big show if you go out and you put the work in and buy right. Because everything that comes to me, and Ken, I'd ask this back to you. In all honesty, I put as much work into prepping and getting my stuff together and pricing and the time to unload it and set it up if I'm going to Plainville and setting up, or if I'm going to Atlanta. The amount of work is not much different up front. It just really comes down to can you put together the right inventory in the room?
And Tyler, I know you're a numbers guy, and I just have a quick question, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but when we were in Atlanta, do you know what percentage of the cards that you actually purchased in Atlanta when you were there and actually sold? Like,
yes, I don't have it handy with her. I show you. Ken probably saw me writing on it, but I have a printed inventory sheet, and because I don't want to have to look up comps constantly. So I have on my sheet the card, what I bought it for, what its value was at the point I bought it, the value that I priced it at, and I already have the math that says this is what it is to sell it at 90, 85, and 80. So when somebody gives me an offer, I already know what percentage they're at. All I do is look at my sheet. And I don't have to comp the card to look at it, and I know where I'm at, right? So for me, and I put the new card in as I get it, and go from there. So that helps me. It keeps me organized, but it also it just helps me know where I'm at, right? And we talked about before, I'm still fairly new to this, and it took me a while to get to that point where I felt really confident about putting that kind of inventory together, especially in short periods of time. And we sold a lot in Atlanta, so now we're back into buying mode, as you mentioned on your regular podcast, Ken. And I have confidence that I can do that now. But a lot of it comes back to really thinking this hobby, and if you really want to do it, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And so if you put the research into it, you put the organization into it, you can get as much as you want out of it.
And one thing and I know we're going to go on. We have tons of questions. One thing I just wanted to circle back on that is that you need to have the skills. So you're talking about going to a big show. You could take a bunch of inventory to a big show and that would be fine. But if you have the skills to go there and be able to identify cards and buy cards while you're there, that could 2, 3, or 4x, your weekend. Just knowing and identifying and having the skills to buy the card at a good value and be able to resell them, because you did that a lot this week, and I think that added a good percentage, to your bottom line.
Yes, certainly, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Good. See, this is why these questions, this is why we're giving ourselves some time to dive into each one. So, all right, that was the first question, guys. So I which is great, but I think maybe a little me too. Like we'll try to be a little quicker, I guess, but good conversation for sure. Next question from Rich Zwiddlebug Cards. He has 2 questions, so we'll just answer the first one and the second. I'd love to hear your take on the state of wax in the hobby. Is there too much product or not enough diversity? Ken, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? It's not too much product, but not too much, diversity, but just too much of something, right? It's like you could tell they're overproducing now. In the last few years, when Don Russ would come out, or Prism, like, to me, it's football, so I'm going to sit on the football. Once it came out, after a few weeks, you couldn't find it on shelves anywhere. Aftermarket, it was maybe doubled in price or up, 50% or 40% or whatever it was up, right? You were paying a premium for it. Now, I mean, this year it's like Prism came out, everybody, Dick's and Target and Walmart and Best Buy and everybody still has it for sale. So it's not even scarce right now. There's so much of it to go around. I think they're just hurting the market. And the only thing I'm going to add on that, today I had over 60 Prism cards that I was preparing. I wanted to get an order together for PSA. Out of those 60 Prism football cards, I only have 12 that I can send. And they were all pack pulled cards. They were all cards that I pack pulled, and there's problems with all of them. There's dents, there's scratches, there's print lines, there's these dimples. All the cards are in horrible condition.
My answer is probably short and sweet here. I think there's probably too much variety of product, right? And I think it leads people down, buying really cheap product there that looks really cheap at first because it's out there, and they just rip everything. Where my advice to you is, if you're going to only rip the premium product, even if it's the retail, which is cheaper, but just rip the premium product. Avoid the rest of it. Because there's no value in it. Like, you can get the biggest card in there, and it's just there's no long-term value.
When you say the premium, are you saying like go straight to the hobby boxes? Is that
no? Even in retail, I'm saying so. Prism, Optic,
IPs.
So what was that?
You're saying the premium IPs, right? Like,
yeah. So if you're thinking about just retail, forget the hobbyist side. Optic, Prism, Donruss is okay because you can hit, you can still hit the downtowns and there's some stuff there. But stick to that. Stick to those core products. What I would say is Panini's core products. And if you're on the Fanatics side, stick to Topps Chrome. Stick to Topps.
Bowman.
Topps Chrome Update, Bowman. I'm not jumping into Cosmic Chrome. I'm not jumping into that stuff. I don't need another random out of 50 Paul Skeens because there's 75 out of 50 Paul Skeens that exist. Because in the long term, the only ones people care about are the core products. Those are the only ones that have value down the line. So stay in those lanes. And then if you're going to drip hobby, just be a little strategic about it. I would, for probably bang for your buck hobby, I would jump into Contenders or something like that, where the hobby box is cheaper, but I got a chance to get a bunch of autos. Like that's my best thing. But if I'm I'm not really going to try to rip Prism Hobby because I had a great conversation actually with Rich, who's asking this question offline today, that I can go buy the Jaden Daniels out of 99, out of 225, or out of 199, 225, and 249, all raw out of Prism for the cost of 1.5 hobby boxes.
Yeah,
and I'll grade them. So that's
most likely get 9s or 8s, but you can grade them.
That's fine. I'll be okay at a 9. I'll be okay at a 9.
And then the last thing I'll say is I think right now, especially when we're talking about Panini, they're just printing as much as they can while they have the licenses. And I think you're seeing that run up on these like obscure, like new, the new IPs or not new, but you know what I'm saying? There's way more IPs, and like what I would say in a perfect world, right, is just take a bunch of those ones that aren't great and just throw them into Chronicles and make Chronicles an amazing product. Like that's what I would say. You take all those retail SKUs of Phoenix, Recon, Zenith, and just stuff them all into Chronicles and stuff like, and that's what I would say. All right. So second part of Rich's question is also, what do you think about quote unquote case hits? There seems to be more and more of these in each product, and the value across those hits varies tremendously. Seems like manufacturers may be gearing up to vary which case hit they include, which could result in a sizable price difference. What's stopping, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're buying cases because we know we're guaranteed a case hit, and saying Don Russ, you're going to buy a case because you're going to hit it downtown. Right. And I think, when you go to Prism, what is the case hit in Prism? I was asking this question that, we know, but I think like the color wheels and the color blasts and all that, I think those are just in hobby. So in the retail stuff, I don't think there's case hits there. So we look at Absolute, which is mostly absolute garbage, right? except for the Kaboom, right? The only reason people buy that is because they want to hit a Kaboom out of the box, right?
They got the explosives in there too, right?
They have these explosives, but the prices on explosives are not even close to where the Kabooms are.
Yeah.
So, if you're buying a case of the retail mega boxes, you're going to get a case hit. Maybe you'll get a Kaboom, maybe you'll get an explosive, right? It's you don't know what you're not, at least with Don Russ, you're almost, I'm saying almost because I've known people who ripped it and gotten no case hit, but you're almost guaranteed a downtown in a case. So yeah, and you know what? The case hits are everything. They're everything. It's why people are ripping. They're ripping this product because they want the case hit. Period. End of sentence. If there were no, and they know if there were no downtowns or Kabooms in these products, very, very few people would buy that because there's no other value in the cards really besides putting them in a discount box.
Yeah, and on the Absolute, even if you rip a case of Absolute Blasters, the Kaleidoscope short print is considered a case hit by Panini. I just ripped one, and I got an Austin Eckler Kaleidoscope short print. It's worth about $8 maybe on a good day, and that was my case hit. So you got to rip the megas or up to even get the Kaboom or explosive in the Absolute. It's so. I don't know. It's really tough, right? Because and listen, I'm somebody who did very well with case hits, so I'm not going to knock them. They worked. They allowed me to do a lot. But I think probably the genesis of Rich's question is, Panini's getting really interesting when Optic drops because now we're going to have uptowns. There's going to be uptowns and downtowns.
The genesis of Rich's question, which is also a case hit.
Yeah. So, that's like, that there's that in Mosaic, right? So that's interesting. They consider Genesis a case hit, Micro Mosaic's a case hit, and I think Kaleidoscope's even considered a case hit. Mm-hmm. So now you've got 3 case hits there. I've never figured out which one of the 3 that people like the most. Yeah, I think it varies day to day. I think, they're clearly overprinted. 23, I think 23 Optic drop. FOTL showed us that some weird stuff is going on. I think there's good value in buying the old ones. when they were still more scarce. You know, I would just tread lightly. If I have them, I'm moving them quickly. They are great liquid cards, so if you can get them at a good price, buy them and get them out of your hands as fast as possible. They're not investments.
As I've been known as a PSA hype beast flipper, these case hits are crack, right? Like everyone wants them, and you know what would be the worst thing to happen to them if they were actually serial numbered. like I think the fact that they're not serial numbered is huge for them, because if I'm not talking about the black Pandoras and the gold and the the 101, I'm saying like the normal run, if we knew exactly what it was, it wouldn't be so great. But you know what? I think at the end of the day, it comes down to people are rabid for these things. And when I say these things, I really think downtown kabooms. Like, all case hits are not created equal, but even the lower end case hits still are going to retain okay value, for the most part. Not your $8 Eckler that you paid a case full of blasters for, but like like a Genesis or like there's other case hits. So I think overall, there's probably a high supply, but I think there's still a higher demand than the high supply. Call me crazy, but I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, the last thing I would leave on that question is, it's interesting. I think the problem with the overprinting is bigger in football than it is in basketball. Basketball, it's way different. It is hard to find a basketball kaboom. Absolutely.
Downtowns are in 1-1.
Yeah, downtown's in 1-1. Kabooms in Crown Royal. So if you're on that side, get them all day.
The difference is those are hobby exclusive, so it prices out so many people to even have a chance at those cards, which I think is a con, actually.
Yeah, which is why if you look on the football side, the most expensive case hit to hold, the best case hit to hold is Color Blast.
Yep.
Yeah. If you got a Color Blast, hold it. It's not going down.
Yeah.
There's not a Color Blast going down.
And then Color Blast in basketball is Spectra in basketball.
Yeah, right? It can be basketball there, because in football they do 2 Color Blasts: the white in Prism, and then they do the black and Obsidian. Yeah. Okay.
All right, cool. So I think we'll keep it moving. Thank you, Rich. Matt Ryan, he's I know him through the CBA group. I do trust this guy, and he has 2 first names, but I still trust him. Matt Ryan. Mm-hmm. So why are dealers/collectors afraid to test the open market? With auctions being very hot right now, I continue to see people posting the same cards for sale on story posts for months on end, rather than just sending to consignment or an auction house. I recently sold off some stuff to fund a Mookie Betts Bowman Chrome Orange. Great card. Congrats on that. And many of the cards sold for 50 to 150% more than the last public comp. Maybe I'm a risk taker, but I'd rather use the marketing of a top consigner and test the waters rather than being tied to a comp. I think I should be the first one to talk on this, probably. Hell yeah, Matt. That's what we do. Someone's not going to pay you what last comp is. Send it off, and they can fight to the death for it. No, I absolutely agree with you. Ken unknowingly was watching one of my card auctions on PC Sports Cards. It was at Paige Becker's back in the fall, and he said, "Oh my God, Jordan, it just went for like double comps." And I was like, "No, Ken, it went for new comps." And that's the truth, though, is like that is the upside. So if you're going to get paid whatever percentage off of an eBay auction or a Gold and Fanatics, whatever auction, it still has the chance to be 150% above what the last comp was, or 50% above what the last comp was. So then your percentage down is still going to be above comps, or you could take a bath on it, which I got to be honest, really, like, I've sent thousands of cards off to consignment over the last year. I've been shocked and disappointed maybe a handful of times. It's a drop in the bucket.
It's always a risk. You're always taking a risk, and congratulations on that. I mean, that's awesome. That's what we like to see in the hobby.
Yeah.
And you never know. You never know who is out there is looking for that card. And I personally never have done well in Facebook groups. I've bought things in Facebook groups, but I've really never done well selling things in Facebook groups. So, for me to hear this story, I'm cheering for him, right? But I know on my end, I've put cards up, for consignment, and I put my own cards up for auction. And some of them I've been like, oh my God, I can't believe how high that went. And I felt great that I did that. And other times I'm like, oh man, that stinks. I can't believe that card went so low. Somebody got a steal on that card.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So it's that second part that keeps people from leaving the Facebook group and giving up control of what it actually sells for, and take a chance of sending it to consignment, or trying to put it on auction themselves. I still, when I put my stuff on eBay, it's a this price or best offer, right? I still do not want to take a chance of putting cards myself up on on auction, like a 5 or a 6 or 7 day auction, because I'm afraid that it would just go so low because I don't have enough people, eyes on my stuff on eBay.
So versus your own eBay, and then I know you used PC not too long ago. Different experiences overall.
Yeah. I mean, with PC sports cards, I think that probably got more bids on it than I would have gotten, putting my own cards up to bid, just because they have more exposure and they're, more people, like I said, more eyes on that. But you're still taking a chance. Right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're still taking a chance. You're putting a card up there that, say, it could be a $500 card and it might only sell for $250. You have to be okay with that. You have to say, I am putting this in somebody else's hands, because you can't say, I'm going to give you this card, PC sports cards, but I'm only going to, it has to be $500 or more. Right. Because it doesn't work.
There's not reserves. Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. Right. It's you've got to put it out of your own hands. And I talked about this a few weeks ago on my own podcast, that it was okay. I put it out there. I watched it right to the very end. Some of them I did well, some of them I didn't. But at the end of the day, I still sold the card. Right. Maybe I didn't sell it for what I wanted it, but at the end of the day, I still sold the card. I generated some income that I could put into something else.
Well said. What about you, Tyler? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a time and place for it, and it depends on the card, right? And that's the best way to get the most value out of your card. I just bought one of my pickups in Atlanta. It's the only way that I know I'm going to get the value of the card is going to go to consignment, and it's going to be my first venture into PC sports card. It's the first Bowman Auto with a Braze top prospect.
I need to get an affiliate link or something.
Yeah,
for real.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So, I mean,
maybe they'll sponsor us.
Yeah.
But to your point, Jordan, it's how do you set the new comp? And sometimes with the card, especially a card that isn't, say, a PSA 10 that hasn't comped, but just as a raw card, somebody's got to set that first PSA 10 comp. And the only way to set that comp is to get it out there in a public sale. And I would, I have a pretty strong eBay store. But if I really want to sell that kind of card, I'm probably just going to move it to consignment and and take advantage of their marketing. For sure.
Absolutely. And, they have not just them, but like a lot of the big consigners have a ton of they're safe sellers for hundreds of thousands of people, right? Like that 100%. They're going to see their stuff. So, all right. Awesome. Thanks for that question, Matt Ryan. And again, congrats on getting that Mookie. Cyrus Tatro, another CBA guy.
I think that's Tatro.
Tatro?
Is it Tatro?
I'm gonna have to ask him. Tatro. Osiris. Cy Guy Cards. I know Cyrus. I can't pronounce the last, so we'll have to rethink who's pronouncing these names next go around. Thoughts on Patrick Mahomes versus Tom Brady? Wow, we're getting into one of those discussions. If Mahomes stays on the path he is over time, do we see Brady's market start to fall? So, Ken, the resident Chiefs fan, why don't you start Tom Brady hate?
He asked the question, but then what he put out, I'm not going to agree with. I don't think Patrick Mahomes staying on course, doing what he's doing, is going to make Tom Brady's cards fall. football. I
Well,
think
because if he plays 15 years, he'll have like 12 Super Bowls, right? With the
that it
pace.
doesn't matter. I mean, you can have one more than one GOAT in the sport, and Tom Brady could be the original OG, right? Or the original GOAT. I mean, when you look at the 20 years that Tom Brady played, right? And now Patrick Mahomes is going to be playing, pretty much in a whole different NFL. Right. I mean, there's rules changing, everything's changing, the kickoffs change, this is changing that. So you cannot compare apples to apples, even though we're going to compare how many Super Bowl rings they had, how many winning seasons. I mean, I've said this before. I think the Chiefs are a cookie cutter of what the Patriots were for 20 years. Right.
Yeah.
I with the coaching and the positions they filled on, not only on the coaching, but on the field as quarterback and tight end and defense and defensive, coordinators. I just think they're a cookie cutter of what the Patriots were. So I can't see no matter what Patrick Mahomes does, that it's going to affect Tom Brady's market.
Yeah, I would say that, I don't think it impacts Brady's market. I think we're not that far away from, especially if Mahomes completes a three-peat, we're not that far away from him becoming the highest priced football cards of all time, right? We're already close. He will, I think, get there probably if he wins, especially this one and maybe one more. But I don't think it moves Brady's market. I think it's no different than you have strong Jordan, Kobe, LeBron markets. You have strong vintage baseball markets or things like that. They'll just move into that echelon of cards that have floors that don't have a lot of volatility. Everybody wants it's a grail card for even people who are doing this to make a little money that still have collections. They're going to want those cards in their PCs, and there's going to become safer and safer cards is what Mahomes cards will do, and I don't think it impacts Brady's market at all.
Yeah, and furthermore, they're at totally different time periods of cards, and they were drafted at different times. So there's just like by the time Mahomes is done, he's going to have way more cards than Tom Brady will have. And when you talk about significant cards, Mahomes will have more significant cards than Tom Brady will have. Just like I'm not talking market. Market cap probably eventually too, but like I'm talking like just number of cards. Like I think that's something too, but I don't see another thing that's going to come back eventually is that two quarterbacks have beat Pat Mahomes in the playoffs, and one of them's Tom Brady, and he beat him twice. Okay, so like there's also that, and
Jordan just got canceled.
Well, it's the truth. Am I lying? I like Mahomes more than Brady. I I don't hate either one. Like I like Mahomes more than Brady, but like it's a fact. Like that cannot be disputed. And then also I think it's important too is like has Joe Montana's market crashed since Brady won those?
I don't think he ever had
I don't
a market.
know, but
he
like
never had a market.
Joe Montana? You don't think
I don't think he ever had a market.
His high grade rookie card, Joe Montana.
Yeah. What do you think a PSA 9 Joe Montana rookie card goes for?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just saying, like, has it gone down since Brady overtook him? Well, that's tough too, because then you're looking at the boom. So it's like before and after with pricing. So like what I'm saying is I don't really know if it's gonna hurt or help because it when you look at it in pricing and cards, like the position is apples to apples, maybe, but the whole card situation is apples to orange. It's not the same, right? It's not at all. So, I guess what I'd say is no. I don't think it's gonna like affect it.
They're going to be compared. They'll be comparing those two for many years, until
and they'll leave out that Mahomes had 3 O linemen with COVID the week of the Super Bowl and was starting with 3 Raggedy Anns and 2 starters. So and then he's running around everywhere doing that dive throw and hitting a running back in the face mask in the end zone. So don't get me started on that either. But all right, thanks, Cyrus.
Yeah.
let's
So
see what.
we're just over an hour, so we could probably wrap it up here, and we can save some of these questions and some new ones for next week. We might have to go a little earlier on the questions on the mailbag listener
Okay.
questions.
We
Yeah.
could do that. I mean, that's fine. Or we could just try to rapid fire them. I don't care. What are you guys thinking?
I mean, you want to throw another one out there, you can. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's do one more.
One more. I know. I'm having fun doing these, to be honest with you. Let me see a good one. Let's go with.
How about Greg Kohler?
That's the one I was looking at. Yeah. Greg Kohler, do you think there will be a greater separation in value between a PSA 9 and raw cards in the near future? Why don't you go about that, Ken?
I'm gonna say no, because it's if you set up as a dealer at a show, I mean, when people come up and see a raw card, they immediately they want to do it against a 9. Even if it could be a 10 or it couldn't. It used to be an 8. I mean, when I got into jump back into the hobby, it was a raw card would be equal to PSA 8, but somehow now the raw card has gotten to a PSA 9, and it's like it's a 10 or bust, right, is what it comes down to really on most cards. And with the massive grading right now, and anything below a 9, I think people are cracking out and just trying to sell off raw. So a lot of times if we see a raw card, I want to say it's less than a 9, but most people, if you're selling it, they want to compare it to the price of a 9.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Ken, the value between the two may increase in separation with 9 becoming far, far less than a raw. Right? Like that could be what it is. I watched a YouTube video today. Someone was showing it was Penix, the red Pandora optic. Raw did 70, PSA 9 did 43. So maybe that's the separation, which is crazy to think about. And then I guess it comes back to, well, how valuable is a 10 then?
Yeah. And that could be we could do a whole hour on what's the multiplier, right? Because if there's 3 of us here with 3 different opinions, and if we added 6 more people onto this stream, there would be 9 different opinions on what a 10 would be. If we didn't have the phone or the alt or the card ladder or whatever to tell us exactly what we should be paying, right? Could you imagine at a show if there was no internet?
Well, that's a interesting thing to say, considering when Tyler asked both of us about that Saquon PSA 10 last week. It's probably worth what I guessed now.
Yeah.
I sold my Saquon last weekend.
The auto?
Yeah. The red wave to not 199.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, it really depends on what side of the table you were on at shows, right? And I think online, like on eBay, and the other auction houses, I think it's different. I think the pricing is much different than when you're in person trying to sell a raw card versus a graded, like a PSA 9.
I'm going to have a little different opinion than both of you on this. I think this year's product is going to push it the other way. I think you will see the 9 gain value just because of the gem rate. I mean, we're looking into the Prism data now, and the Prism, I think there's been around 2,600 cards submitted out of 24 Prism. So I think we've got a good enough sample size to see what the gem rate's going to look like in the long run, and the gem rate's 23% compared to 50% last year.
Now, do you think what you're saying right now strictly applies to that set of Prism, though? Not in general. Just
no, the Donruss gem rate is lower. Donruss tends to have a really high gem rate typically, but it's down from, I can't remember what the 23 exactly was, but I think even we're on a lot of cards, we're under 50% on the Donruss for 24. And when Donruss Hobby drops, when you have those die cuts and those press proofs, which tend to grade worse,
Oh
you're
yeah.
going to see those gem rates on the Donruss drop even more. I think what's probably propping it up in the 50% range right now is the Optic Preview Pandora has about a 59% gem rate, so a higher gem rate on that card.
So maybe Optic will look all right this year.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what Optic looks like when it drops. But I would certainly say that I think it'll go back the other way. I certainly saw when I had the 2 Jaden Daniels downtowns this week, people were more willing to pay the premium on the PSA 9 over top of the Raw. I had much more interest all throughout Friday at the $2,200 sticker on the PSA 9 than I did the Raw.
And
So,
I would
which
be
is-
the same way, because just in my mind, I would think that card was already graded. It was less than a 9 and it cracked it out. Right. I mean, that's what I would think. Not to say that but in my mind, that's what goes through my mind all the time when I see.
Nah, it was a dude that pulled it that Tyler beat me out on Facebook Marketplace for.
That's exactly right. It was fact pulled, and I think the guy will pin it. To be honest with you, I think it was a good copy of it. But
Yeah.
I just think that there is something to that, because you all can as we wrap up here, but just to correct me on this, the Raw to an 8 wasn't that long ago. I know you said when it was to the hobby, but really the 9 to Raw phenomenon only started really heavy at the beginning of last year. That's kind of all that I've lived so far back in the hobby, but that's still a fairly new phenomenon. So does it hold? I just don't think it does, because when you get into thicker patch cards and stuff like that, right, then Raw does become 8.
Yeah.
So if the gem rates are better or are not as strong as they were in 23 on the 24 product, I think you'll see the shift back. It's just my opinion, but I certainly think there's enough data out there that would
I'd agree that it's product dependent. I would agree that it depends on the product. That's what I would say.
I would say that's probably pretty good. And I haven't looked at any of the earlier kind of off schedule product for 24 yet, but I'm sure
especially because like Ken, you cracked out like a bunch of 9s and gemmed them not too long ago, right? Like a bunch. So
that was Caitlin Clark cards.
Yeah, but it's still saying like, all right, so even if you buy a 9, some people could be like, this looks like a really good 9. Why not?
Well, with the gem rate being so low on this year's Prism football, I mean, now I have to go back. I talked about having over 60 cards. I ended up with 12 that I thought could gem. I'll have to go back now and look again and see what would be the best of, that maybe the 9 would be almost like a 10 in that product.
Yeah, and I just looked at Mosaic real quick while you all were talking. The gem rate on Mosaic is only 35%, with over 2,500 cards submitted as well. So
that's usually easy gem, that product.
Yeah, it's consistently in the 40%. So it's certainly 24 products seems to be and then a lot of it I think is Panini probably just rushing to get it all out there before they lose the license.
Yeah, going hyper speed on the machines over there. Yeah.
Yep. So.
All right, I think
we're good.
You want to wrap that up on the questions? We missed out on a couple baseball questions and a.
Well, we can hold them. We'll hit them next week. We'll put those to the top of the list for next week. Yep.
All right.
Good.
Cool.
All right, fellas. Well, thank you. This has been fun as usual, and we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Any parting words? Come on, Jordan. Tell them about the Facebook group.
Yeah, we have a Facebook group, Hobby Chop Podcast. I'll probably be posting it on my my story again with a link, and then I think I'm gonna try to grab a QR code and put it in like in my profile, like like the little highlights in the Instagram profile, so people could just click it and do that. So, so yeah, come join, come ask the questions. We're hoping to grow it and just create more engagement, like we did with the the listener questions. Hopefully, that's just the first of many things we could do to make the podcast interactive and enjoyable for the listeners. And honestly, I had a blast doing the listener questions. That was so much fun. I enjoyed it way more than I expected. So yeah, looking forward to do that more.
Yeah, and
And
let us know what you think about how we answered questions or answers, and we'll do
Yeah.
our best to engage with you throughout the week.
yeah, and if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. You leave some messages below too. And where are you going to be this weekend? You guys doing any shows?
Might travel around and see what I can get into at infield or maybe fish kill or something to see if I can start buying.
Yeah, those
I gotta get inventory.
were my two options: north or south, Enfield or Fishkill.
I figured I was going to call you and see where you were going.
And then I'm getting my haircut, and my son's getting his first haircut Saturday. So
Brad,
Fun.
bring the little bag to put the
yeah,
hair in.
he's got banged. Yeah. So that's my weekend. And then I'll probably I got some nice packages coming in the mail to sell, and then I'm hoping in next month at some point I'm gonna have a fairly large collection pickup that I want to talk about. So
Good.
hopefully that ends up coming to fruition and nothing falls through. But yeah, that's the hobby forecast for me right now.
All right. Well, thanks, fellas. Tyler, hopefully I'll see you this weekend. And if not, we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And we have to do something to say goodbye. Like just
Gem your 2024 Prism. Goodbye.
Have fun.
Take
Let's
care.
enjoy it.